Kentish Council meeting. Welcome to the people in the gallery and to our councillors. Thank you to the staff that are here tonight to guide us through the meeting with their expertise in their field. So I'm going to declare the meeting open at 6:04 and we'll go to number 1, which is apologies and leave of absence. So tonight we have 2 apologies from Councillor Dickinson, who is unwell, and Councillor Haig, who has been held up with work as she works with Ambulance Tasmania in Launceston. Number 2, we have declaration of pecuniary and conflicts of interest for the Local Government Act of 1993. So I will remind councillors, if you have a pecuniary or a conflict of interest on any item in the agenda, you need to fill in the form and give it to Mandy, please. Number 3, we have confirmation of minutes. So the confirmation, I have a recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Kentish Council held at the council meeting room held at Sheffield on the 18th of February be taken as read and confirmed. Could I have someone to move that?
Yep.
Councillor Blenkhorn and Councillor Richards. Any comments or questions about the minutes? Councillor Hughes.
I'll restrain for voting in that because I was off due to sickness.
Yes, thank you. So any other comments or questions? So all those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Then that is carried. We'll go on to number 4, which is presentations. Nil. Notice of motion, nil. Petitions, nil. We have response to questions raised at a prior ordinary council meeting, and we have a recommendation that the responses to the questions from Robin Thomas, Sam Ralph, Jodie Coleman and Kevin Abood at the council meeting held on the 18th of February 2025 be received and noted. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Thwaites and Councillor Richards. All those in favour? Anyone against? And that is carried. We have public participation, questions on notice from the public. We have 2 questions from Shane Allison from Port Surrell. We have a proposed response to both those questions, and we have a recommendation that council in relation to the questions on notice be received from Shane Allison and endorse the responses proposed and authorise their release. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Lane, Councillor Cassidy. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. We have public participation, questions without notice, and I will remind anyone in the gallery that is wanting to ask a question, please, to state your name and the topic of which the question is that you want to ask, and could you please keep your briefing of your question to a limit, please. So I will ask now if there's anybody from the gallery that would like to ask a question. So I have Sam Ralph.
Right. Last meeting I asked a question about the how much Kentish ratepayers should pay towards the bike track. Anyway, I've got an answer back. So that 82% of the track is in the Kentish municipality. Well, that's all right. But when in the DNA of the development, when it's passed it said the Latrobe put in a submission and put in a section that went from Warrawee to Railton. So that wouldn't be part of Kentish. Then Kentish's one goes from Sheffield to Railton. And the consultant, you said, AK Consultants, they did a story up on it, and they said there's 47.4 kilometres, and that's what was approved in the development of when it's approved it. So and then they also said that there was 1,000 kilometres, no, 100. Anyway, the thing was 100 kilometres long. So obviously we're only half. We're no more than half. So we should not be paying any more than 50%. So, that tells you that, like, the distances are all in the development application. So I don't know where they got the other part from. So obviously, my question of last meeting, why should Kentish ratepayers pay 76% of the maintenance when there's only less than half of it in our municipalities?
Okay, so look, we've given you an answer. We will look into it further for you and look at the development application that you're referring to and the 47.4 that was in the approval, and we'll respond to you on that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ralph. Is there anybody else from the gallery? Who's that? Mr. Allison.
Coach Allison, Port Sorrel. Does the Kentish Council have or employ a comp controller? And if so, who or whom is that?
We'll take that question on notice for the...
You have to take that on notice, Ms. Mayor. It's a simple question.
I'll ask the General Manager. Would you like to comment on that? On the comp controller?
Didn't we answer this already on
we said
your
that,
questions on notice?
No, you haven't. You didn't really answer it. You voided the preamble a little bit. But under Section 39E of the Local Government Act, councils employ comp controllers. I think the word must is in there. Apply.
must.
So I'm just inquiring about who the comp controller is.
If we review the information, which, look, I think we're just going to refuse the question because we've already answered it.
But no, it's a different question tonight. If you hear my question tonight, does the Kentish Council employ a comp controller? And if so, who or whom is the comp controller?
Well, we've already answered your question that we're not required to employ a comp controller. So why are you asking the question again?
Well, so you're saying you don't employ a comp controller?
Because we're not a joint authority.
No, nothing to do with the joint authority. Do you employ, the question tonight is, do you employ a comp controller?
No.
So you don't?
We've answered the question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got another question.
Just a moment though, because is there anybody else in the gallery that would like to ask a question? Because we usually have one question at a time. And if there's time, we will give you the time for a second question. So, Mr. Stanley?
Andrew Stanley, 23 Ennis Avenue, Bailton. On the 6th of March, Council did an inspection at Ecclesia at Outreach. We have a letter here. On that day, they complained about breads. It's up here, no labelling on the bread. And there was an altercation with another lady that was receiving foods from there. Had to go at the council ladies. And in this letter, we've been told that we will be charged if there's outbursts again. This is a lady from the public going crook at the council. This is not a worker or anyone from our volunteers going crook at you about what's going on. And we're going to be fined for a public person an outburst. Can you please explain that one for starters? I did on the day say that I would not comply with the bread labelling. I said I wanted to see first what lawyers are trying to push on us, enforce, or what act it is, so we can see that. And the lady said, oh, yeah, no, I understand that. We'll go away and get that for you. Well, this letter's come, there's nothing on there saying what you're trying to enforce. Our understanding was, being a charity, that we didn't come under the same laws, that we can give bread away and stuff. Since the council went back to Loaves and Fishes and complained that they were supposed to label it to us, we've had no bread to give to our people. We do, 10 people that are, palliative care. We do another 30 people in the area as well. We do 70-something families a week. If this keeps going, I bought this at a business in the Kentish district. There's no labelling on that. That didn't come from the baker. It came from the baker originally. They went to a business, then passed on to another business.
Oh, this is unreal.
Thank you, Councillor Blencorn.
Oh, my God.
Being singled out as a charity.
Oh, we're on bread watch. The council on bread watch.
Thank you, Councillor Blencorn. I'll ask you to refrain from those comments. Continue, please, Mr Stanley. And could you get on with your question then, please?
Notes here just to ask some of this. So what law is trying to enforce on us for this ridiculous thing? It's my understanding the charity didn't have to go into these things, but could be wrong. Why we're being singled out? Last year, at the end of the year, we were given an Australia Day award for what we do. First week back, we're getting hassled and attacked. We've lost volunteers, risk being shut down, helping these people, all because of this. We've lost bread from, loaves and fishes because of this nonsense. How far do they want to take it? We want to know what's in the plastic bag, where it was made, what chemical, how far do you want to take it? You can't enforce these things. You tell me KFC donated food. Are they going to give away the Colonel's 11 secret herbs and spices so we can label them? How far do you want to go with it? They're not going to do that. Grandma's secret recipe is not going to be given up. You're going to lose your market. You're going to use your market call right at the radio. All the people, they cook at home, that half of them. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. There's never been no problems. Show me the evidence where people have died and stuff from our bread. Has anyone ever, from what we do, been sick? No, nothing. It's just a joke.
So can you just give me your question so that we can take it on notice and we can have
when he's going to stop this nonsense.
Right, how far...
And show us what you're trying to enforce at least.
Right, and what we're trying to enforce as well.
Well, I'm disgusted. This is absolutely wrong.
Thank you, Mr Stanley. We'll certainly take those.
Well said, Andrew, well said.
Is there anybody else from the gallery that would like to ask a question? Mrs Thomas?
Thank you. Just a quick one. Please, this one, I will be asking it as ye, because it's a question about how each of you councillors feel about something. And look, it's not, it's a very pertinent and relevant question to the issue of jabs, of the experimental injection. And sorry, it's Robin Thomas from Paradise. And okay, here we go. And my very personal question to individual councillors and Kate: how would you, so ye, feel if your very close loved one had died from their COVID injection, or if your own grown child was bound in a wheelchair from them, or their pregnancy had miscarried, or your baby was made seriously ill or died just from these injections? How would ye feel? So please, I do understand that dear Mr. Brown could not answer this because it's from each person. And please, Kate, whether I have to ask it through you, then please, I'm requesting that, but of course all of you can hear me. And you can answer me personally at my PO Box, snail mail address, PO Box 130 Sheffield 7306, my mobile 0488 048 485, or my landline 64911 297, or my email address, which I think you possibly have.
Yes, I do, thank you.
So I'm asking that with sincerity and great importance, and nothing against you, Mr. Brown, but you could not possibly get me to answer that. So it's a respective question of how you would feel from somebody who has lost a very close loved one. And I really mean it for all the benefit of all our dear residents, that we need to take a serious
Thank you.
of the evidence.
Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. I'll take that question on notice.
We don't need to take it on
No,
notice.
no,
It's just the council to answer individually.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else from the gallery? I'll take Mr. Allison first because he was up first. And we do only have 3 minutes left of our question time.
It's quick. As the Kentish Council operates under a corporate governance model, the question is it a rules-based model or a principle-based model?
Good, thank you. I'll take that on notice. Thank you.
It's sort of a simple question that could be answered as well. It's not an open question.
We'll just take it on notice, Mr. Thank you.
Thank you.
Notice, and also regarding my previous question, as a single authority, do you operate or employ or have a control?
Thank you. Mr. Stanley, we've got 2 minutes.
Just last week, I've got two 12-year-old girls, and you're probably aware of the vandalising in the toilets at Railton. I caught two 12-year-old girls finishing off and doing what they were doing down there. So I posted a video of some of the damage and what they'd done type thing, and I put a thing up saying they best get up there and cleaned up before noon the next day. I talked to a council worker there after that night. He thought it was a good idea too. They were locked up type thing, but he said they'd come down and open them up or whatever. I don't have to ring. They thought it was a good idea. The parents thought it was a good idea for these girls to come and clean up their mess. So the next morning, I seen the girls, and they got their head down, and you remember what one of them did type thing, but they had a broom with them. They went up and started cleaning up outside. So they cleaned up outside a bit, which I was pretty proud that they actually did a gutsy effort to do that and own up to what they'd done. But it was locked up, so I rang the council to try and organise what was said was possibly was going to happen. And the parents of the kids that are fine with them, being punished and cleaned up their mess and stuff and whatever. But there's been nothing. I rang up and talked to the council about it. They took all the notes, blah, blah, blah. Nothing's become of that. The toilets have been cleaned since then. Are the council going to make these kids accountable for what they've done? The parents, and my personal thing is they should be supervised and clean the toilets for the next couple of months, if that's allowable by the council. Because if nothing's done, where do we stop when these girls are 15 or 16? Watch them burn our houses down in Railton or Sheffield or wherever, That's the girls. The boys did it the week before and the day before. I think what was the kids' reason was we were only making memories.
Thank you. I think there's an issue here with workplace health and safety as well, that they're on council property doing cleaning up and there's no covering for them there, and also for anybody else to go and work with the children, they've got to have the...
Look, we're not going to say any common sense, so I understand the other sharps and everything involved and all that type of thing, fair enough.
And it's the discipline of the young girls, of course.
Because the police don't do anything, they're in the same position. It's the hierarchy telling the police. It's not the police officers and stuff. They can't do nothing, but they're told we've got to do it this way, we've got to do it that way.
Right.
They can't do their hands are tied. These kids are going to get out of control. I know myself, I was one of the biggest rat bags out. I didn't do that type of thing, but I did probably worse in other ways. And the way this is heading, I can see where it's heading. These little kids, like one of them's actually a really good leader, because he's just leading kids in the wrong way.
Right.
So what are the council going to do? What have he got a plan to do? He's going to use some common sense and make these kids clean up, in some way, shape or form. If the parents are having a fine with it and the community wants it, what's the problem?
Good.
We are bound by the new child safe regulations as well. So that does obviously...
No, that all works. And one of these kids, if they're not going to school, gets taken out to dinner every day and, let's discuss your problems as punishment. They're laughing at us. You won't see it. They'll burn down our houses at any point. It's ridiculous.
I know, it's a serious concern.
Well, that's why we need to be looking at, people not listen to outside information of what we should be doing. Look after your people inside them boundaries, because that's what you're supposed to do. I think we're looking outside too much on all these issues, everything we're talking about. We're getting the outside information. All the information's in this boundary, in this community. Tell them to bugger off. You've got the power to do that. You can tell all these other things to go away. How they react to that, well, that's their business. But you can do that. You've got the power to do that. we elected you to do that.
No, we'll certainly reach out and look to help, but obviously we do have to operate within the regulations and the laws, etc. So appreciating that there was a good deed trying to be done, and I think that's great that the kids had some remorse and we're looking to rectify their ways. We also still need to make...
I'll probably move to another country, I reckon.
Thank you for the question. All right, so that brings our question time to a close. So we will go on now.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I think there's some more questions that need to be asked here. So the good people in the community have turned up to ask some questions, and you can extend that time. It is
Yes,
up
I can.
to the chairperson. I'm sure we've got plenty of time tonight.
Councillor Blenkhorn, thank you. Nobody else has put their hand up tonight for a question, so I'm going on to number 10. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Tiny and behind
I didn't see your hand up. Sorry, Katrina.
Katrina from Railton. Hi. Just in regards to the Railton RSL, we're honoured to have you come down and speak on Anzac Day. I'm just asking, have you put the input in to invite John down in regards to the question of the handover back to Railton? The RSL actually got handed to RSL TAS in 2011, and we have no explanations on that, and we're asking if we could get help from you with a bit of further ongoing looking into to clarify how it got handed over and what's going on, because at the moment we run it, there's meant to be a sub-hub, but RSL Tasmania took it over in 2011. We've had no input of payments, help, or any idea that they even did. And we had a big community meeting with John, and John wants to give it back, but there's also a bit of they want a payment to get it back. It's a community building that was community gifted, community owned, that has all of a sudden in 2011 turned into RSL TAS building with no explanations. I got told paperwork gets lost, and like I said, when you're the top dog, it shouldn't. We're being told that they do not have to discuss with us, but they are working into wanting to give it back. So I'm just asking if you could please have a little look into that in regards to making it as viable as Sheffield. The community deserve it back in our hands, and we shouldn't be paying anyone to get it back when we haven't even been told how it got taken away.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I can hear the passion in your voice there about wanting to make sure this is the RSL is operating properly. So we'll take that on notice, and we might be able to even have a meeting and just get all the facts and figures, and see who you've been contacting with, so that we can help you through that process if we can.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your question. Okay. All right. Thank you for all those questions, and we'll now go on to number 10, which is the Planning Authority. And in accordance with Clause 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 2015, I will advise that the Council will now act as a planning authority. And we have a development application in front of us tonight for 192 Carey's Road, West Kentish, which is a proposed change of use to a function centre. And we're in receipt of an application made under Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, seeking approval for community meeting and entertainment uses, including the retrospective change of use of an existing building located at 15 Browns Road, West Kentish, for the purposes of a function centre. The application seeks approval for the proposed use of 15 Browns Road, 49 Browns Road, 192 Carey's Road, 194 Carey's Road, given the proposed use relies on the visitor accommodation to demonstrate needing to locate on the site for operational efficiency. Now, we have a recommendation in front of us tonight that the report by the Statutory Planning Officer concerning 192 Carey's Road, West Kentish, the proposed change of use to function centre be received and council resolve to approve the application for the proposed community meeting and entertainment use for a function centre subject to the following conditions, and there are 19 conditions with notes. So could I have someone to move the recommendation? Councillor Blenkhorn, and seconded by Councillor Richards. So I'm going to now hand it over to our planning officer, Andrew Newton, who's going to take us through the development application. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Good evening, everyone. And through the chair, if I may, for commencing the presentation this evening, I believe it's appropriate to acknowledge the time and the effort not only of the proponents but also the representatives in relation to this application. This application has, or this proposal has been before Planning Authority before tonight, and certainly I was the planner who did that previous assessment, and I was quite strict in terms of the lack of detail from both sides concerning that application. So I want to acknowledge both the proponent and the representatives for the time and the effort and the detail that they've put into their submissions. So without further ado, the application that we've received, as Madam Mayor detailed, is for a proposed change of use to a function centre. The building itself certainly the development was approved as a farm shed. The application seeks retrospective approval to use it for purposes of a function centre. In terms of the application detail, there are some slight changes from when we last looked at the development, mainly in relation to the proposed hours of operation, the events and the maximum occupancy that's been proposed. So the application documents propose seeks approval for 7 days a week with general hours of 7 a.m. through to 10 p.m. with general events, functions for up to 60 people. Consent approval was also sought for larger events and for evening events with up to 150 people, but don't be limited to no more than 30 per calendar year. Hours of operation would extend slightly to cater for those evening events with PA amplified sound to be switched off by 11 p.m. to enable the use to cease by 12 midnight on Friday and Saturday nights, with the curfew to be 9 p.m. Monday, Thursday, Sunday and public holidays. Obviously all the application documentation that was advertised part of the public exhibition has been included as an attachment for you councillors to consider this evening. Just flicking through the slides, these were the proposal plans provided by the applicant, noting the parking on the left-hand side of the slide there. There are conditions proposed in relation to the proposed parking areas. Mentioned about public exhibition, there were 6 representations received as part of the exhibition of the application. I trust councillors should have received copies of those representations prior to tonight's meeting. The issues that have been raised in those representations have been considered as part of the assessment process as is required as a planning authority. In terms of the issues raised, understandably given the nature of this development, a lot of concerns were raised regarding compliance and previous use of that building. We also have queries that were relating to parking and vehicular access. Certainly in relation to this proposal, there are additional conditions concerning Carey's Road, which haven't been previously considered by the Planning Authority. So I'll touch base on that briefly in relation to the proposed conditions. There were a number of queries concerning residential amenity and also impacts on adjoining agricultural uses. So any development application that is discretionary for us
In relation to those clauses that rely on performance criteria assessment under the planning scheme, these are the clauses for which council has discretion whether to approve or refuse the proposal. Working from bottom to top this evening, clause E961 relates to variation to the parking requirement for an all-weather surface. The overflow car park in the southern part of the site, the applicant seeks to use that as a grass surface. And then a gravel surface for the main car park. Performance criteria 3 of clause 26.4.1 relates to the water supply. 26.4.1 is a general site suitability clause which considers development in site area. It considers vehicular access, water, wastewater and stormwater management. So given obviously the increased number of people that would be occupying this premises and it's in the unserviced area, water supply needs to be considered. The main meaty bit, and this is where the pictures end for the PowerPoint presentation, this is where the main questions need to be considered very carefully tonight, councillors. The discretionary use of land. Obviously council has discretion on whether to consider or refuse that proposal. The performance criteria is separated into 4 components, which I'll go through briefly. Some of you this may ring a few bells to you from previous times. So discretionary use, it must be consistent with the local area objectives of the zone and consistent with any applicable desired future character statements. Provided those in full as an attachment to the report. It doesn't need to meet every single one of those. It needs to be consistent with it. So you're looking for compatibility and consistency with at least one of those local area objectives and desired future character statements. Part C is really the part where a lot of effort and time has been spent, both in terms of the applicant, representors, and indeed the planning officer. It's been spent in relation to determining this clause. Part C is structured that a discretionary use has to be required to locate on rural resource zone land for operational efficiency. And it is then in relation to one of the 8 subpoints. So any discretionary use must be required to locate for operational efficiency, and it must meet one of those 8 subpoints. In relation to this proposal, really the only way through for this development is subpoint 4, where the use is seeking that approval to service or support a primary industry or other permitted use on the site. So in terms of primary industry or other permitted use relates to the visitor accommodation use that's been approved and permitted on the site. You'll note in the assessment provided to you, councillors, I've gone in detail and in depth in relation to the meaning, definition and applicability of those words. Any planning legislation needs to be interpreted in order to be applied. So obviously strive to interpret that to the best of my ability. Part D relates to minimising loss, primary industry use land, so agricultural land, minimising constraint or interference, and loss of land within an irrigation district. So they're the main points. Stop sharing for the moment. Through the chair, if I may, given the number of conditions that are proposed, I believe it will be prudent to, before accepting questions, to actually go through those conditions one by one, so that councillors have a thorough understanding of what the conditions mean and why they're proposed. So from page 50,
on that, what page would that find that on?
Page 55, Councillor Blank, when you beat me to it. So page 55 of the agenda, you'll note the recommendation with the conditions. Condition 1 is the endorsed plans, the standard condition that endorses the documentation that was considered and advertised in order to come to the recommendation. Condition 2 relates to approving the use and exactly the bounds for that use as a visitor accommodation under the planning scheme that's in operation at the time. Condition 3, important to take note of this condition. You'll note that the recommendation for this evening is for approval with modified conditions. This is one of those. So condition 3 relates to a limitation on the approved use that was sought. It's proposed that consent is only given for a maximum of 30 events, functions per calendar year, a maximum of 150 guests per event or function. Events and functions associated with the function centre must require all visitor accommodation units on the site to be hired by the same group hosting the event or function, and the function management plan that was provided with the application to be amended to reflect the same. Condition 4 is in relation to hours of operation, which are largely consistent with what the documentation sought approval for. Condition 5 relates to amenity. This is an important clause that relates to ensuring that there's no unreasonable noise nuisance, that any noise nuisance can be investigated and pursuant to the Environmental Management Pollution Control and Noise Regulations. Condition 6. This is another important one. Through the representations that have been received, through council officers' engagement with the use in this site, there are some changes that are needed to this site to ensure that the use does not pose unreasonable impacts to adjoining residences and to adjoining land uses. So condition 6 proposes a number of requirements. It confirms that the amplified sound must cease beyond from 11 p.m. Friday to Saturday and 9 p.m. Monday to Thursday, Sundays and public holidays. That's really reiterating where a lot of the source from the noise issues and complaints have come from. Mitigation measures in relation to closing the doors beyond 10 p.m. And that the function centre manager must be on site for the duration of any event or function on that site. Part C is in relation to soundproofing. Certainly the walls and ceiling within the building are not insulated, certainly not acoustically treated in any shape or form. Propose that those treatments be carried out. And then sound monitoring is also an important consideration. This condition is as much for the benefit of the proponents as it is for the representatives. It enables council officers, in terms of our health officers and compliance officers, to be able to accurately obtain data in relation to any reported breach, and it then allows the officers to make an informed assessment and decision as to whether there's any noise nuisance that's occurred. This means that if the proponents are not managing the use appropriately, then that can be followed. It also means that if any complaint were to be vexatious in any means, or that the use or that the noise nuisance was not unreasonable, then that can be demonstrated. Also take note, Madam Mayor, through the Chair, an error to be rectified at the bottom of page 56. It relates to, it's more an advisory note confirming that just because all those noise mitigation measures for Condition 6 are complied with, doesn't mean their noise nuisance is satisfied. It still needs to be that those measures are in addition to more reasonable practical measures to minimise an environmental nuisance. That wording should be Condition 5, not Condition 4. I appreciate that to be noted. Thank you. Condition 7 is vegetation buffer, which I believe to be a fair and reasonable condition regarding the extending of the vegetation to provide the visual and some acoustic separation between the uses. Condition 8 refers to a Part 5 agreement. There are agreements already in place on those titles in relation to minimising residential subdivision and the use of those land titles. This further emphasises and cements that the use is to be contained and that they all rely upon each other, hence why all 4 titles are being advertised and considered as part of the settings tonight. Condition 9 relates to works. So following representations received, Council's Infrastructure and Assets Department undertook further assessment in relation to the condition and the appropriateness of Carey's Road. There were discrepancies noted in the traffic impact assessment provided with the application in relation to the width of that road. So given the number of vehicle movements that are proposed from this use, there needs to be a minimum trafficable width to enable that amount of vehicular traffic to safely traverse the road. So condition 9 relates to road upgrades to bring that in line with the Local Government Association Tasmania engineering standards. Condition 10 relates to the vehicular access. There are some minor tweaks and changes needed. The Infrastructure and Assets Department have noted 3 potential options to mitigate the vehicular access to make that more appropriate. Condition 11 effectively stops the use of the reserved road access off Browns Road by the proposed use. It doesn't stop all access. It is a Crown Land Reserve Road. The Crown may issue an access licence for other uses such as farm vehicles, etc. This condition doesn't restrict those, it just restricts the use that's proposed as part of this permit. Condition 12 is about signage, specifically TAS business information signage, which is our blue and yellow well-known tourist signs throughout our locality, having no signs along Carey's Road to appropriately direct visitors to the site. Condition 13 is in relation to the number of parking spaces required, minimum of 50. Condition 14 relates to the primary car park, and that's construction requirements. Condition 15 is the overflow car park and its construction requirements. 16 is pedestrian access, so that pedestrians can have an accessible means to go from the car park to the site. Key word being they're accessible. Condition 17 is in relation to any stormwater generated from the development, i.e. car park, making sure that doesn't cause a nuisance. Wastewater report's been requested from our health officer. Condition 19 relates to food safety, so any food products that are supplied, the state by food registration requirements will apply, and the standard notes in relation to that. So thank you for bearing with me with that, councillors. I trust that was beneficial. We welcome any questions or queries at this point.
Thank you for taking us through that and certainly going through the conditions, being able to hear that and follow it as well. So we appreciate what you've done there. So I am going to open it up to questions that any of the councillors would like to ask Mr Newton tonight. Any questions? Councillor Blenkhorn.
Okay, Mr Newton, I've got a pretty good list here. I don't know if I'll get a few answers to. Did you seek legal advice on this development at all? Like with some of these wordings and that, like in the planning document, you know, like they can be taken a few different ways, you know, can be interpreted, you know, some words. So have you sought any legal advice on some words?
A lot of the definitions and references that have been made come from previous tribunal cases in relation to this clause specifically. So obviously I have a strong degree of confidence in providing that within the report.
So what is the current zoning as it stands on that property now, the current zoning?
So if we talk about right now, at this present moment in time, council, as you'd be aware, we have transitioned into the Tasmanian statewide planning scheme provisions with our local provisions. The land is proposed to be zoned rural. Now the Planning Commission made their decision the other month under Section 35K, the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, which basically said in simple terms to council, 95% there in terms of the planning scheme. There are some modifications and changes needed, and provided us a time frame to get those changes to be made. The Land Use Planning and Approvals Act states that where you do have that decision that's been made, you can't make any decisions that are going to be contrary to that decision at that point in time. So at this point in time, the zoning would be rural based on that Commission's decision. The planning scheme, as I understand, will be fully commissioned, as in planning scheme maps, updated documentation on the Planning Commission website, 26th of March. This application was assessed in terms of when it was received, it was paid for and validated when the interim planning scheme was still in effect and in force. So because of that, it is assessed under that interim scheme that it was submitted under that point in time.
Okay, so the interim planning scheme, when was that wiped? When did that interim planning scheme finish?
Interim planning scheme has finished, but in relation,
What was the date?
I understand your question. That point is irrelevant because the Land Use Planning and Approval Act states if this application is paid and made valid when the interim scheme is in effect, that's the scheme to be assessed under. The only time that changes is if the application was made a week immediately following the decision of the Commission. At that point in time, it then gets taken into the transition provisions and it's then assessed effectively so both schemes, but it's under the state scheme at that point. That's why this application is made assessing under the interim scheme because that was when it was validated and assessed at that point in time.
Okay, specific question here. When did that property change to a rural zoning? When did that property change to a rural zoning?
Okay, not relevant to this assessment.
No, but that's the
I'm
question I'm asking.
Through Manager Mrs. Phoebe, be happy to provide that on notice. I don't know the date immediately off the top of my head.
But it has happened, has it?
It has happened, yes.
Okay, now, how come we were at a presentation at a council forum last week and we told that I specifically asked the question of our consultant planner and she told us in this forum here last week that we haven't changed, we're still under an interim planning scheme. So why have I got information from you and then from a consultant that is not the same information?
Okay, so I wasn't at that workshop.
But that's what happened around this table.
Okay, how is that relevant to the application?
Well, I was just asking you dates and times and why. Okay, so this is a rural zoning now on that property.
But it's not relevant to the planning authority.
Okay, but when did it change to the rural zoning then?
It's not.
A point of order, Mrs. Mayor.
Thank you.
I would like to say that Mr. Newton has replied to that when we are sitting here, as this planning application sits in front of us, that question is not relevant to this. So it needs to be dropped and carried on with.
So we'll take that question on notice, Councillor Blenkhorn, and Mrs. Phoebe might be able to answer that at some stage. Thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Richards.
To Mr. Newton, the 19 recommendations here, how enforceable, for me, how enforceable are they? Does all that have to be done prior to any events being there, or can part of it be done in some events held, or, I mean, how do we enforce it?
Right. The two parts of the question, how enforceable are they? When are they applicable? The vast majority of them would be applicable as of the point in time that permit is issued. So they would need to be complied with before any further use at land when the events are held. In terms of the enforceability of those conditions, the answer to that is simply yes, they're enforceable. My previous experience as a planning compliance officer, these conditions by our compliance officer, yes, they're enforceable.
Thank you, Councillor Richards. Any other questions? Councillor Twaits.
Thank you. Mr. Newton, thank you. Is this complicated? The changes, the conditions are enforceable, but it seems to me in practice it would be very difficult to do that. It would involve an ongoing regulation of this to, make sure every one of these 19 and all the other requirements for the business, so make sure that they're all operating all the time, and that if there's to be 30 events a year and no more, who's going to be counting to make sure that we don't get to 40 or 31 even? So, and who's going to be making sure that they are not making noise or using Browns Road or, it becomes a big headache to me, I mean, for council to be doing this, to be constantly monitoring this, and it's a big expense. So, so the question will be, how enforceable is it? I mean, what powers have we got in 5 years' time, say, to make sure that, to measure that everything's still being done properly?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So I might answer where I can. My role as a planning officer here this evening, and then I may refer to Mrs. Phoebe to provide any further comment that she believes may be appropriate. In terms of the conditions, from my professional perspective, one of the most challenging aspects would be in relation to noise. How you monitor that? Because a lot of that would be after business hours. How do you gather any evidence and information to ascertain if there's a breach and to what extent? Is it an unreasonable impact? Has a noise nuisance indeed occurred under the Environmental Management Pollution Control Act? That's why the condition that's proposed stipulates noise monitoring. So if we do receive a breach, go to the proponents, get the data, ascertain the breach that way. So from a cost perspective and the compliance to cost that all local government has to bear. All local government has a statutory, a legislative requirement to ensure compliance with our planning schemes and the permits that we issue. That's the role of the planning authority. We have to do that. In terms of the efficiency of that, that's why the conditions have been drafted in the way that they are, especially in relation to the noise matters. In terms of other matters, there's plenty of other ways to obtain that information and evidence, as has been undertaken by our compliance officer to date. So Mrs. Phoebe, is there anything further you want to add to?
Really only that there are a number of mechanisms under the Act which permit us to obtain that information, and if there are continued breaches, there is also power under the Act to give notice that council intends to revoke a permit. So it wouldn't be years of ongoing non-compliance that we just have to put up with and keep following up. You know, it comes to a point where you do have that power if there were consistent breaches of the permit conditions.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Thwaites.
A couple of other questions about the road access. So Browns Road is a public road, is it not? Why, or how have we got power to say you can't use Browns Road to access the building when Browns Road is a public road?
Browns Road's a public road, yes, but the vehicular access from Browns Road along that northwestern boundary is Crown land. It's not a public road. It's Crown land. The title, its designation is a reserved road casement, not a road reserve. A reserved road casement is a strip of land that the Crown has reserved for the future provision of a road. Any access across that land needs to be approved through Crown Land Property Services. Normally they would issue an access licence or a lease across that Crown land for that purpose. Through my assessment, I understand there is no access lease or licence that's been issued recently for that land parcel. It's also, crucially, not been sought as part of this application. If they did, they would need the consent of the Crown. As part of this application, no consent of the Crown has been given. So, we as a planning authority have no right or no ability to approve additional vehicle movements for that use across that Crown land accordingly. So that's why that condition is proposed in that method. So the reason why this condition 12 relates to the visitor information signage is really to provide the visitors who are attending that site, who are obviously going to be unfamiliar to that area, that reassurance as to where they're going. they can easily be led astray in terms of any directions they've been given or in terms of their mobile devices, GPS and such forth, and it can be easy to take a wrong turn. Certainly as the road exists at the moment, if you see a tarmac road that goes off one way, that's gravel to the other way, and you're driving a rental car, and that rental car agreement has a condition saying you can't drive on a gravel road, that's where a lot of those issues have stemmed from. Notwithstanding that, obviously the main point for that condition regarding the road improvement to Carey's Road has been that the crest, given the number of vehicle movements proposed, that crest has now to be dealt with. If there were less vehicle movements, it would still be within the acceptable requirements. But to come back to your question, I hope that answers in relation to Browns Road. We're not saying you can't drive along Browns Road, because yes, it is a public road. But we're saying you can't use the Crown Land access.
Okay. So, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
And Carey's Road, so you touched on that. My reading of the our manager assets and infrastructure report was that, I think from memory it said the proponent could consider sealing the road. Now that's different from the proponent must seal the road. You've taken it to the full extent that they will seal the road and seal the access point as well. I just wonder how much real engineering weight there is behind that recommendation, because could consider sealing to be converted into must seal the road. I just wonder how would that stand in an appeal?
Okay, so in terms of the wording, obviously the condition states that the developer is to widen the crest, seal 6 metre wide in accordance with federal code standards. That's what the condition is recommended to you. So if a permit is issued, that's what's enforceable. In terms of when you said consider may, that's in relation to the referral section. So the engineering officer obviously received the application from planning department saying we're seeking your conditions and comments. We've received an application, standard practice. They've provided then their comments. So then that is then passed to the manager of infrastructure and assets. So the comments is obviously sent to the manager. Consider this. The conditions relate to final determination from our road authority. Does that make sense in terms of the wording that's in the report?
I'm sorry, I read that as the proponent should consider, but I haven't got it in front of me, but does it actually say the planning officer should consider?
Page 30 is the referrals. Let's have a look.
Yeah, I think your pages are different.
Page 43.
43, isn't it?
Number 9. Which number is it?
It's not a condition. I'm looking at the referrals section, which is earlier on in the report. Internal referrals, I believe it's on page 30 of the agenda.
Page 16.
Okay, so the engineer's comments, there's some dot points from that access. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th dot point. The officer has said, consider widening the road at the cut matter crest to form and shape the base course and seal 6 metre wide with 500mm wide shoulder in accordance with TSD 2 version 3. That's the gap standard engineering. For a section of Carey's Road from Browns Road to 10 metres past the access 194 Carey's Road. So coming to the top of those dot points, the subheading there is the comments recommend as conditions. We've then got our dot points which have there those what effectively they should be they're really effectively the comments provided to the manager of infrastructure and assets. The conditions obviously are proposed as part of that permit, and the condition is clearly that the developer is to undertake those costs, to undertake those works, which is a fair and reasonable condition to put on there because of the developer that will be resulting in the increased traffic movements. Planning conditions that the planning authority look at when needed to be satisfied, it's for a planning purpose, not for any other interior purpose. Not trying to do something that's beyond the bounds of the planning scheme and us as a planning authority. It needs to be reasonable and fair relating to the development and not unreasonable. That's, no one, in terms of a reasonableness test, confident that it meets that. Certainly if we as a council are not confident in relation to a condition and its enforceability, we'll be looking at that before bringing it to the table.
One more.
It's okay. Thank you, Councillor Twaits.
You're doing fine. The requirement that all 3 nests be booked out by the same person who's booking the function centre. I just wonder what would happen if it was only 1 or 2 nests that were booked out, and does that interfere with the other? I'm thinking about the cost of booking out three places like that, plus the barn and the unit in the barn. Just if you wanted to book out 2 of the 3 or 4, what's the difficulty?
Okay. I guess ultimately that wording in that condition is in there primarily for 2 reasons. One, it emphasises that proposed function centre is to service the support the visitor accommodation units. The other components within that application is the modifying conditions for any events, functions, whether they're tourism, corporate, hospitality, whatever, that have no interaction, no reliance on the accommodation whatsoever. It cannot meet the requirements in the planning scheme. I'm very confident about that. I've pursued this assessment to within an inch of its life effectively. I'm confident that that's the case. So that condition enforces that. That's the first reason. The second reason is that this is what the proponents seek to apply for. Their function event management plan clearly stipulates that for their larger events, all the accommodation cabins need to be booked as part of that, which makes sense. You look at the offering, you look at the type of accommodation that they're providing, the type of boutique, the type of luxury accommodation that they provide. If you had visitors staying there that weren't related to a large function that's there on the site that then goes till 11 o'clock at night or what have you, that they're not aware of, they're trying to get some shut-eye because they've had a big day on the road, it's not very good for their business. That's why they've got this in place. So it's really twofold. It's part of the planning scheme, but it's also because that's what the proponents want to do.
Thank you, Councillor Twaits. Councillor Lane.
I'd like to congratulate the team, Mr Newton, Mrs Phoebe. It's complex and it has just taken up so much time to get it right. The representatives have been listened to. I've been in contact with them. The applicant has been, working hard to get to this point where we can be. So congratulations to, and that you've stepped it through so succinctly to make sure that we are all have comprehension. My question is to number 12, which is road directional signage. The venue has such a high quality of, how they view their product. It says here a bold bold directional signage. I would hope that it would be, I don't want to use the word quirky, but in keeping with, you know, their style of venue. I mean, it's not going to be a blade that is blue and yellow. Are we enforcing that tourism blade, or can it be in keeping with the style?
Okay, so condition relates to road signage within the road reserve. So within the road reserve, road signs, ideally they should be in accordance with the Tasmanian visitor information signage.
Right.
Because when you're driving a car, you don't want any distractions. You want clear, succinct signage that you can see. So the condition actually stipulates that type of signage. So the road authority has stipulated that condition, so that's fair and reasonable to seek that road signage. Now, the proponent hasn't sought any other signage as part of this application. We can certainly consider that if they want to develop any signage that's in keeping with their style. They might want to have that, for example, at the main access on the Carey's Road. By all means, we can look at that. They haven't proposed it. This is more from a road safety perspective. That as these visitors are driving up Carey's Road, that reassurance signage is there. Because there's no doubt been travelling through the state, they'll see that blue and yellow signage and know that that's visitor and tourism attractions to look out for.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So nothing precluding them from applying for further signage. Yep, they're attracted if they want to do that. I'm happy to look at it.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. All right, are there any other? Councillor Richards.
Just for clarity, for me to support this, I need to know that we can enforce these conditions and they can't start these events until the conditions have been implemented. Is that what you have been saying?
That's what the recommendation is. Yeah. Generally, permit conditions are enforceable and need to be complied with from the moment that permit is issued. So normally a use or development cannot commence until those permit conditions are complied with. Sometimes for added emphasis, we'll put it on there prior to that use commencing. Such and such and such needs to be supplied, provided, complied with before that use commences. There's some of those conditions in there that emphasise that this has to be done. Other conditions don't have that, but by effect, because it's a condition of approval, that condition must be complied with. Only when a condition states that it needs to be completed within 6 or 12 months of the issue of the permit, that's when you get an exception to that, where they've got a bit of extra time. So all these conditions be in effect and enforced if a permit is to be issued.
Councillor Blinkhorn.
Yeah, okay, just on the point that Councillor Twites pointed to, the nests, not 3 nests, have to be booked out to make this function centre legal, so to speak, because that's what it's meant to be there for. The function centre is meant to be supporting the nests. So in that role, like you as a planning council, how would you actually find out that then, how could you actually police it to find out who was actually booked out their nets on that 159th function? Like, is that a part of how you could sort of cross off one of the permit, that didn't approve? Like, can you actually ask for the booking list for that function to see if they actually booked that accommodation out?
Yeah. I guess that's my role as a planning officer, obviously conducting the assessment. My role was to provide planning assessment. Obviously that's what I'm doing here this evening. I have referred these conditions to our compliance officer and our health officer prior to bring it to this evening. In terms of your other point on the question, in terms of how would we go about it, how would police it, refer that question to Mrs. Phoebe.
We could ask for evidence of those things to confirm that that was the case under land use planning approves that.
Thank you, Mrs. Phoebe. Thank you, Mr. Newton. Are there any other questions before we look at the recommendation? We do have a recommendation that the planning officer, the report by the planning officer, proposed change of use of the function centre be received and council resolved to approve the application for the proposed community meeting and entertainment use for a function centre subject to the following conditions. We do have a mover, we do have a seconder. I will put it to the vote.
We just,
Oh, sorry.
a reminder that there was that Andrew spoke to, just so that everyone's familiar,
Oh, yes, that's right. I wrote that down too.
So just
there was a
so
change.
that everyone's reminded of it.
There was just a change in number 6. It should be at the bottom of page 56. It should be condition 5, not condition 4. So we will note that in this. So I will now put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Then that is carried. So before we finish here, Andrew, I'd really like to thank you and to Mrs. Phoebe as well for the work you've put into this. I know you've put hours and hours and hours. You've crossed every T and dotted every I to make sure this development application has been very thoroughly researched, and you've really given us a lot of information for us to consider. And as Councillor Lane said, the proponents and the representatives have really thought this through, and I think that we've come to a decision now that Council have approved and will be issuing the permit. So I really appreciate everything that you've done. Thank you. All right. Good. Right, we will go on to the next one, which is 10.3. I have a recommendation that Council cease to act as a planning authority. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Thwaites, Councillor Hughes. We'll go on to number 11, which is Development Regulatory Services Department, Building Department report. We have a recommendation that the report advising of building and plumbing applications and notifications received for the month of February 2025 be received.
Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor. Don't we have to vote on the cease to act as planning authority?
Oh, didn't I do that? I did say a recommendation, and I did a mover and a seconder. I didn't vote. I beg your pardon, my apologies. So we have a mover and a seconder for ceasing to act as a planning authority. All those in favour? Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I'll go to the recommendation on page 198. The report advising of building and plumbing applications and notifications be received for the month of February 2025 be received. Could I have someone to move it? Councillor Hughes, Councillor Richards. Are there any questions or comments about the building and plumbing applications? As there are no questions or comments, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. We will go on to 11.2. We have a recommendation that the status report of development applications for the month of February 2025 be received. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Lane, Councillor Cassidy. Are there any comments about the status report?
Just a question on it, Madam Mayor. On the last row on the first page of the thing that said Edwards at Cradle Mountain is greyed out, but it's still pending.
Yes.
Like to see it.
Through the chair, that should be approved.
It should be.
Like the great there.
Right, so it's approved.
It's approved.
There were no representations and it was approved under delegated authorities.
Good.
Thank you. We'll make an amendment to that status report. Thank you, Councillor Thwaites, for picking that up, because the grey is all approved and that one was pending. So thank you. We'll make a note of that in the minutes. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Hughes.
I still notice on the AG and BJ Riley, and that is the gravel pit out at Nook. And they're still ongoing, is it, with them?
It's my understanding that they're still liaising with the EPA in relation to that. We've had no advice yet from the EPA to proceed.
It's been going on for a while.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Are there any other comments about the status report for February? As there are no other comments or questions, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. We'll go on to 12, which is the Officer of the General Manager, Neil. We've got Corporate and Business Services Department, the Finance Report, and we have a recommendation. Thank you, Mr Newton. Recommendation that the financial report for the period ending 28 February 2025, as provided by the Team Leader of Finance, be received. Could I have someone to move that, please? Councillor Lane, Councillor Richards. So do we have any comments or questions about the finance report? Councillor Twaits.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think our finances have been very well managed. Just some questions on the capital. There's just wondering if we could get some progress report on the annual road resealing program, and then I've got one other question.
Right, so the road resealing program, Mr. Murray, could you answer that?
They might have even started in Kentish.
Yep.
Recently, they've finished the road, the contractor, and they have progress. And I'm not exactly sure where they are, but I imagine it's going to be done and dusted within the next week.
Beautiful. Okay.
It's on schedule.
Thank
On
you.
schedule, good, thank you. Another question?
The other question, I'll declare a bit of an interest because it's across the road from a block that I own, but there are sandbags on the road and have been for some time in Hope Street. I just wonder if there's not a more permanent solution. I'm not after an answer tonight, but I just, think it would be nice to add something a bit more permanent.
Permanently. Can we take that question on notice? So we'll get back to you on that one, Councillor Twaits. Thank you.
For that indulgence.
That's quite all right, Councillor Twaits, no worries. Are there any other questions or comments about the finance report?
Yeah, just a question.
Councillor Blenkhorn?
Cash investments by institution, just a query like NAB, current amount invested 5 million. CBA, I think it's about 3 million. And the ANZ, 52, is that 52,000, is it?
I think it's $52.
$52.
Okay, I thought it was.
I think it's only $52. It is. Yeah, it's an at-call account. Yeah. Right, thank you for that, Councillor Blenkhorn. Are there any other questions or comments? And we have a mover and a seconder, so I will put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. We'll go on to 14, Infrastructure and Assets Department, nil, Operations Department, nil, Information. Council forums, we have a recommendation that information on topics discussed at the 18th of February 2025 and the 5th of March 2025, Council forum be received. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Lane, Councillor Cassidy. So they are just listed there. Councillor Twaits.
Question on that, Madam Mayor. With the when we were in that forum, we talked about the location of the bottle and can return container. Is that something that should come to a council meeting to make a public decision on that, or is it just a decision?
No, we end up going forward with it. Otherwise, we were going to miss it, that opportunity for it. So
we don't need to ratify that.
No, that's
surprising. If it wasn't.
Right. And we might...
We can bring it to ratify the decision, but I mean, largely we've had to execute, otherwise miss out. So because of the May deadline, So I'll check and make sure that, we need to bring something through.
Right. Thank you. We'll take that one on notice too. Thank you, Councillor Twaits. Any other questions about the council forums? As there are no other comments or questions, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Then that is carried. So now we have the delegates' report, and I have a recommendation that the delegates' reports be received and noted. Could I have someone to move it? Councillor Hughes, Councillor Richards. So as you can see by the delegates' report, I've got my meeting and events there, and Deputy Mayor Councillor Lane has got her meeting and events listed there. So, councillors, are there any other reports that you would like to give? Councillor Hughes.
Over the long weekend, I did have the opportunity to speak to Susie Bauer, Wendy Askew, and also to Rebecca White was there with the family. And it was a big weekend down there, the Sandfest, and it was very hot as well. And on top of that, the rodeo at Gary Park, it was the biggest crowd they had for a long time. And Sunday and Monday was polo cross. So it was a big event, and plus rowing was on as well.
That's cool.
And I'm talking to the Department of the Biosecurity today, and they have released last night the collective virus, and the baits have been taken. They've released some more today, so the whole of Sheffield's been covered pretty well. And I think Rutland might be done as well. Not sure on that, but there is a myxomatosis about. Hasn't been around for 15 years. Unknown reason. It has raised its head again. It's all down through Acacia Hills and all that. So it's very good.
Thank you. Yes, I noticed that over in the Health Precinct Park, they've got signs up there to say that the Khaleesi virus has been released. So there are quite a few signs over there in the Health Precinct Park. Yeah, thank you. Any other councillors got a report that they would like to table? I do have a certificate here. It's the 2025 Tasmanian Life Awards, and the nominee for the Communities in Action for Suicide Prevention was the Men's Shared Health Outreach. And I know that Councillor Hughes and Peter and Bruce Long went to Launceston for the presentation. So they were in the category of Communities in Action for Suicide Prevention Award. There were quite a lot of nominations in that particular award, but you didn't win, but you were there. You were nominated in that particular category. And through that whole event, the Sheffield Men's Shed was the only men's shed that was represented across Tasmania.
Yep.
Yes.
And with the dinner last Wednesday night there, where it was highly recommended by the different people, also the two doctors there, and it was a very good night, and that you met different people from different walks of life and that, so that was really good.
Well, we've certainly all had a lot of respect for the Men's Shed here in Sheffield and the work that they're doing. But and they're highly respected in the fact that a lot of the community groups always go to the Men's Shed when they need some help with any building or any furniture or anything that they need. So we wish you all the best and hope that you continue to work really well together down there.
We might be grumpy old fellas, but we still get to work.
You do work well together. Are there any other reports from any councillors? Then we do have a recommendation, so I will put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Then that is carried. We do have the Council Decision Status Report with a recommendation that the February 2025 Status Report of Open Council Meeting Decisions be received. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Lane, Councillor Cassidy. Are there any comments on the Status Report? There are 3 pages there. Has anyone got any comments that they would like to make? As there are no comments or questions, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? And that is carried. I'll go on to 16.4, which is the Sheffield Community Information Evening Notes. I have a recommendation that the notes of the Sheffield Community Information Evening held on the 27th of February 2025 be received. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor Hughes, Councillor Richards. Are there any comments about the information evening? Councillor Hughes.
I'm quite pleased with the Barrington Hall and that committee and that they have taken very short notice after the town hall there. We had the meeting out there. It was well represented that by the people on that. No, it's really good.
Yes, Barrington Hall was in its fine form while the town hall was closed, because we had International Women's Day there as well. So it was really lovely to see the Barrington Hall used so well. Are there any comments or questions about the information evening? It was Sheffield, but it was at Barrington Hall. Yes, Councillor Thwaites.
At the hall there was some questions and feedback about the bicycle race that was held the Saturday before, and a lot of people were not happy because they'd been charged extra for trucks while they were waiting to for the roads to be cleared, and had complaints from people who took half an hour to get anywhere or longer, and some people from Westbury who were coming here to see someone who's sick waited hours and hours and ended up going home just because they couldn't get past. So the comments that were coming were not nice, but I just wonder if we were going to look it up and see what the story was and get to the bottom of it. So I haven't heard anything.
No, I haven't heard anything either.
Through the chair, working back through the permits and the process on that one. So yeah, there are different permits depending on what sort of event is in play and which roads you're accessing. So Amanda and I have been working through that with both Mike, the community team, so we can bring that back to a subsequent meeting as an action.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Thwaites. All right, any other comments or questions? Then I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. So we're up to 17 committees of council. The Sheffield Recreation Precinct Advisory Committee, we have a recommendation that the unconfirmed minutes of the Sheffield Recreation Precinct Advisory Committee meeting held on the 17th of February 2025 be received. Could I have someone to move that, please? Councillor Lane, seconder, Councillor Hughes. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Lane.
If you all open up the 17.1.1 of the Sheffield Recreation Committee minutes, thank you to Councillor Thwaites, who pointed out on page 6 of 7, the update section. The third paragraph starts with Mr. Braid. Yeah. That actually should be Mr. Gardner. That was incorrectly put. The very first paragraph was under a discussion. Mr. Braid was actually an apology. We had been discussing at the table a comment that Mr. Braid had made about the Sheffield Rec Ground. So that was a comment that was made in the past. The third column, the third paragraph, was actually a comment that was said by Adam Gardner, which incorporated the Sheffield Football and Cricket Club. Thank you, Councillor Thwaites, for pointing that out to me, and that I would just like those two made good.
Right, well, we'll make a note of that for that committee meeting, that it's not Mr. Braid, but it's Mr. Gardner instead, and thank you for the explanation. Thank you for that, Councillor Lane. Are there any other comments? Then I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. So we have the Council Joint Authorities and other committees nil, urgent business nil. Closed meeting, we have a recommendation that the following items be discussed in closed session. So we have 5 items there. So I'll ask someone to move that the recommendation, Councillor Lane and Councillor Cassidy. All those in favour? Anyone against? Then that is carried. So this brings the open session of our Kentish Council meeting to a close. Thank you for attending, members of the gallery. See you again. Bye.